Happy New Year to everyone, and I hope we have a productive New Year, a peaceful one of love and caring, and hopefully we see a lessening of criminal violence. I just want to ask everyone, just reflect on what we have been doing and see how we can do better. I'm sure the churches are helping in that regard, the families, the schools, your workplaces, but individually each of us has to do it. It's a new marker, so to speak. I just want to speak to a few issues and to give you an opportunity to ask me about anything which you may wish to ask me about at the beginning of the year. The year is starting off with a very hectic schedule for us. Right now, I'm in the middle of writing the budget speech, which will be delivered on Monday in the afternoon next week. And I'm hopeful that the debate on the budget, the appropriation bill, will be completed on Friday of the same week, which is the 16th. I'm hoping that it will finish no later than around midday on Friday, and I don't see any reason why not. Because I'd like, and I will indicate that to the Speaker, I'd like to see how we can push the debate. Maybe we do a little hour more in the evening than we'll normally do, because I have to leave for a very important meeting on the very Friday to go to Barbados to catch the plane to go to London and to transfer at the airport to go to Abu Dhabi in the Gulf, in the Middle East. Mr. Ellsworth Dakin of the Energy Unit, the director of the Energy Unit, will be going a little before me. So there's a two-day meeting of IRENA. IRENA is the International Renewable Energy Agency, headquartered in Abu Dhabi. And there's a fund called the Abu Dhabi Development Fund, which has about $350 million US for over a period of 7 years for applications to be made to it in respect of renewable energy. And I'll speak more about that shortly. The assembly is on the 18th. The officials are meeting on the 17th, the Saturday. So I will hopefully reach Abu Dhabi the Saturday night, and then be there in time for the assembly, the 5th assembly of IRENA. There is an announcement will be made there at IRENA. I'd like to be there for it, and I'm hoping that it would be the good news. I don't know, and I'll speak about that shortly too. But when I leave there, I have to get back into the Caribbean in time. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is trying to organize a couple of other meetings for me while I'm there. But I have to be back in the Caribbean on the 22nd in St. Kitts, because I'll be chairing the Monetary Council of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. And from From St. Kitts, I have to travel. That will be Thursday the 22nd, Friday the 23rd. I have to be in Barbados because that evening I'm delivering what has become a very prestigious lecture, the Errol Barrow Memorial Lecture at the Central Bank. The Prime Minister of Barbados has asked me to deliver it, and I've accepted that invitation. So I also have to be preparing the lecture. And then I get back here on the 24th, but I have to be back out again for the 26th, for the Sunday, on the Sunday, which is the 25th, to be in Washington with other CARICOM heads or ministers of energy. There is a summit called by the Vice President of the United States, His Excellency Joseph Biden, as a follow-up to the meeting which was held in Trinidad with the CARICOM heads. And the subject there is energy. Energy and energy security, renewable energy, every pricing of energy, all the issues connected with energy. Now, we made an application in what is called the second cycle of funding. The first cycle was last year. We made an application for funding through IRENA to the Abu Dhabi Development Fund for $15 million US. It's a low interest rate, long term, good money to borrow, to be part of our equity in the geothermal project. Now, a lot of work was involved in preparing this matter, and Ellsworth Deakin at the Ministry of, as the director of the energy unit, played an important role in the preparation of the documents. And there are 80 applicants, 80 applications, from which they're choosing 8. And the total sum would be $60 million overall now, in that vicinity, which they would lend in this particular year. But we 60-70 million, but we are asking for, we made an application for 15 to assist us with what we call phase 1 of the geothermal project, where we are going for a production of geothermal energy between 10 to 50, a plant of between 10 to 15 megawatts, maybe more like 10 megawatts, but that's the range we're going, between 10 to 15 megawatts. And as you know, we have a partnership with Reykjavik Geothermal and the Emera, and more particularly the Light and Power Holdings. Barbados Light and Power is a subsidiary of Emera. It's a Canadian company. Light and Power Holdings and Reykjavik Geothermal out of Iceland, they constitute a consortium which has been working with us, and we have been advised on this by, among other persons, professionals from the Clinton Climate Initiative, part of the Clinton Global Initiative. You probably would have heard Or sometimes you hear these things and you don't put any, you in the media, you wouldn't, or public generally, don't put any significance to it. You'd have heard me sending Gerald Thompson to a meeting of Irina here or there. You would have heard me doing the same thing with Ellsworth Dakin. Here, the foreign minister. A year and a half ago, Ellsworth Dakin and I went to the World Energy Summit in the Emirates. All of this work you may hear, and of course, the man on the proverbial Green Hill omnibus may say that the comrade is only going here sending people there, what's happening. Well, if you're leading, you have to look at the spaces which possibly exist to get the requisite financing. Sometimes it might be grant funding, but sometimes very low cost funding for different sectors. And the energy sector is a critical one. And why it is important that we have equity resources in it, either of a grant funding kind or of a really low cost loans, very soft loans, very low rates of interest over long periods of time, is that the more resources that we ourselves put into the project, which is a joint venture, the more equity that we have in it means when we come to discuss pricing and payback, that we will have a better deal for ourselves than if it is done without resources coming from us or coming through our own instrumentality. It is, I've been saying for quite a while that one of the more important public policy questions going forward, has been and going forward, is how do we deal with the issue of energy. We require it for our modern society, and certainly to aid with our productivity and the competitiveness in our modern economy. Everybody wants to have electricity in their homes and at their business places and at their hotels, which is reliable and it has the cheapest possible price. And the way we have to address that is to look at the forms of renewable energy which can help us in reducing the extent of the importation of fuel. Which, though it is falling, the price is falling, it is still a high price. People forget that in the year 2000, the price of a barrel of oil on the international market was in the region of $15 US, a little less. $20 close to, and then it simply accelerated. And in 2008, in July, it went to $148 US a barrel. And it came down to 120, 115, and then in the recent months, it has been falling steadily. It's about now 60, 58, 59, 60 US dollars a barrel. And we have seen the reductions in your fuel surcharge, and we have seen reductions at the pump. Now, we have to try and have the energy at the cheapest possible price, and we have to do so in a way we can also reduce our carbon footprint, because we have to seek resources for climate, for adaptation and mitigation as a consequence of climate change globally. And you know, we have been having a lot of adverse weather systems, and they're connected to climate change. Now, we don't contribute a great deal in relation to global warming, a country like St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But we at the same time have, by way of an example, in a small island developing state, we have to show that what we can do, because it then makes it easier for you to be taken seriously as a greener country, to attract the resources for climate change, mitigation, and adaptation. But very critically, by having the renewable sources of energy, which are here in our country, the sun, the water, and geothermal, that we can save a lot of money, which we spend in foreign exchange to buy the fuel. It strengthens our economy. Never mind that we get in, for the purposes of generation of the electricity, a special financing arrangement with Venezuela and the Petrocaribe. I will much prefer us using our own sources for electricity here, and you could get the Petrocaribe financing for the motor vehicles and so on and so forth, so that you're sensible, you have a plan, and you work towards the plan. And there are certain things which have to be done transitional, and you do what you have to do transitional as you get to, hopefully, a position where you're within touching distance of having most of your energy, your electricity, generated by renewable sources. And the principal renewable sources are water, geothermal, and the sun, solar. I know persons who are listening to me would say, well, what is the comrade talking about? Well, if you didn't grow up having energy generated by hydro, by water, you would have probably thought that that is also a pipe dream. But technologies advance, and new sources are found for energy, and we have to tap into them. And it is interesting, in the beginning of January, that we have the IRENA assembly. I don't know whether our project is going to be one which we get the funding for it. All I'm saying is an important gathering, and I've been invited, and it is, I think, necessary and desirable for me to be there. Where we are with the energy, since a synopsis, so that you can have an understanding as to why at the beginning of the year I'm according this such importance. I've been on this subject more than once. And the fact that I hold the energy portfolio should indicate to the public that I consider this an important strategic question. In days gone by, when diesel was $15 or less per barrel, there was no real urgency to address the other forms of energy. We had hydro under the colonial government, and then the Labour administration under Milton Cato invested in hydro. So we had South Rivers, and then we got Richmond, and then Cumberland. But where are we? Hydro provides annually about 5 megawatts on an average. Our peak demand, to our daily peak demand, is 20 megawatts. 5 is hydro. Of course, in some months it's a little more than in other months. If you have more rainfall, everything else being equal, that is to say you have the plants up and running, you'll get more electricity than if the rainfall is low. And the rest is diesel generated. Well, we want to make the diesel plant, the hydro plants, more efficient, to lift them. And we want to do solar, and we are doing solar, and we want to do geothermal. The good thing about geothermal as distinct from solar is that geothermal can provide a base load of 98+%, whereas in the case of solar, you're looking maybe 20%. They say that improved technologies can carry a little higher the base load. So even though if you have a lot of solar, you're still going to need the hydro and the geothermal and the diesel to carry the base. And that is how you have to look at the mix. We have a good geothermal source, and Emera and Reykjavik geothermal, they have been putting their resources in it. They've done a lot of technical work, and we are moving along pretty well. Even when you don't see things, any actual infrastructure work taking place, there's a lot of work being done, believe me. And clearly you can understand there's a lot of negotiation which has gone on between ourselves and agreements signed. But before the end of May, we're supposed to have signed off on a business plan May this year. And they're doing all the technical work, all the economic data. I think it's sometime before the end of March they're supposed to send us the business plan, and we have to reply to them at a date before the end of May and come to some understanding so that we can have some more precise numbers as to what we are about. And then when that happens, you're going to see a further ramping up of the actual activity. I mean, it's difficult terrain. As you know, it's close to Suffolk Mountain. They got the western side, they got the eastern side. And decide on further testing where they will do the wells. But if we get 10 megawatts of geothermal by the end of 2017, 2018, and I always say when the professionals give us these rough guidelines, don't hang me, as I say, if they go over 6 months, if they go, because this is a complicated business. But I'm talking about the timelines which they have been given. If we can get by 2018 another 10 megawatts, that through a renewable source with a base load capacity like geothermal, and could deliver that price competitively, that would mean that we have 15 megawatts out of our 20. Of course, by renewable, of course, there would be an increase in demand for electricity as economic development takes place and people have more houses and the like. And in the mix, we have solar. As you know, the government has taken a position that we allow all the solar facilities, the equipment, everything connected to solar to come in duty free. And we have now close to 750 kilowatts of solar PV installations. Vinlec alone has done 557 kilowatt solar PV installations. They've done over at Cane Hall Power Plant. They have done 300 and something. In November we launched it down in Lomans. We have about 27 installations of 29 installations of private and government solar PV systems. We have one down in Beckway and we have one here on this roof. We have a 10 on top of this roof. And there was a net metering system, but now there's a net billing system, so that they sell back to the grid. They're grid tied. So there's a lot of work which is being done. Vinlec has invested about $2.6 million on its solar PV systems for the 557 kilowatt installations. And Vinlec estimates that for the solar PV systems that we have in the country, Vinlec, government, private sector, it reduces our carbon footprint. The estimate which they give is about 100 tons of about 800 tons, of CO2 per year. No, 800 tons is not a significant number in global terms, but what it points to is that we're making our contribution as a small island developing state. And it is in that context of the geothermal that this visit arises. As I say, I don't know what will happen in Abu Dhabi, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed because it would be an important contribution. So that is what my schedule is for the month of January. Obviously, at the Monetary Council, some of the usual issues, including fiscal consolidation and financial sector stability, are issues which are very much on the agenda, including our own indigenous financial institutions. Then, well, on the 12th, I will deliver the budget. Now, broadly speaking, because of the way we do our debates, in accordance with the Constitution, which never used to happen before we had gone to Parliament as in the opposition when we came back in 1994, we do the estimates as a separate debate, and we do the appropriation debate separately. But once you have the estimates in your hand and you approve the estimates, you study the estimates very carefully, you can reasonably speak, certainly on the fiscal side, what is there, what frames the budget, so to speak. There are some specific proposals which will come, as always, and they have to be presented. So that's on the 12th in the afternoon. I want to say that there are several important projects which we have to get off very early on the ground with. Because of the dry season, well, the traditional dry season lasts until the end of May. But a lot of the work which we have to do on the roads, road repairs and so on, we have to be mobilized sufficiently to get a lot of road repairs done. And we have to get them done not only for the main roads, but also for the secondary roads and the feeder roads. So that's one thing. I mean, I want us at the beginning of the new year to be reflective about many things. Let's take roads. Absolutely no question that some of the roads, particularly secondary roads and feeder roads, require a lot of attention. No question about that. And it's a matter on which we are according priority. What do you have in terms of roads in the country? You have around 70 miles of what you may call highways. That's the Windward Highway from Richmond Hill going all the way up to Fancy. Then you have the road, Hospital Road, going on to Chateaubelair, maybe 75. And the VG Highway, that's the third one. Certainly, the less number of miles of motorable roadway, under 100 miles. But they are the roads used mainly. And that's why we spend a lot of time on them. And as you notice, we did the Windward Highway. We're working on the VG Highway. We're working now on the South Leeward, on the road to Leeward, from Hospital Road going down to Leeward Post Office. But unfortunately, nature sometimes takes us off track. Because you get a big landslide. You have to move from one place to go and fix the place where you have a landslide, or to do some detour. You take the case, what happened at in the April floods. Well, it started with Thomas, then the April 2011 floods, and then the December 2013 disaster. Look at what happened at Basin Hole, the river and the bridge. And for several months, the people who go in north of Monbentik had to go to a circuitous bypass, which was not in a good condition. We tried to keep it in as good a condition as possible, and also built a smaller bridge to facilitate with the bypass. But the money which we had to spend down at Basin Hole, if you didn't have the disasters, the repeated disasters on this, you don't have to spend that extent of the money. But that's money which you could have used somewhere else. The same thing at Ginger Village, where the road collapse coming from Espo. We have a detour there, and we're looking for not a temporary solution for Ginger Village, a permanent solution of high engineering quality. So sometimes you get taken off the course. For roads and bridges alone in this year's budget, we have about $57 million, which is about 20, I'm talking about in the capital budget, which is almost 20% of the overall capital budget for the government. Then you add on top of that $13.5 million which you give to Bragshaw for road repairs and the like. I'm not yet talking about the additional $13 million which you have to put at the Ministry of Works to pay the salaries of the chief engineer, all the engineers, the administrative works down there, the electrical inspectorate, and I'm not talking about that. I'm just dealing with roads directly. But even with those sums of money, 57 point something million dollars for on the capital side, and 13.5 to Bragshaw. There are some roads which are not going to be touched by any of those programs. That's why we have to try to get monies for disaster reconstruction to help to deal with some of those also additionally. Now, you may have a man driving a van. You have 25,000 plus vehicles. A man driving a van, an SUV, a car. When we arrived here, just under 8,000 vehicles. So we have about 17,000 vehicles more. If a man meets a pothole, he says, but you know, I pay in my driver's license. Of course, some don't pay their driver's license. But I pay in my driver's license. And look this pothole. Look in the estimates, you will see the contribution made by motor vehicle licenses, what we intend to collect this year, is $10.5 million. We give Bragshaw 13.5. What about the 57 million which I have this year for the capital projects in relation to roads and bridges? A mile of road to repair it is in the region of $1 million. To reconstruct a mile of road with drains and everything is in the region of $3 million. So the 10.5, while it helps, you notice it is a small number. I'm talking the 10.5 what you get for driver's license, a small number in relation to what you have to do. We are doing 8 miles of road reconstructing 8 miles of road with we widening in some places, putting in new drains, and so forth. 8 miles between Hospital Road and Layu Post Office is $26 million. You can do the math, and you see what it is. And we have, this country has a mountainous terrain. We get 100 inches of rainfall on an average per year. And of course, sometimes we get the inches we may get, as we saw in December 2013, 12 inches plus in a 3-hour period. Or in April 2011, you get in the middle of the dry season a torrential downpour over a 24-hour period. Create all kind of problems in the northeast of the country. One of the areas I'm looking forward with great interest is to see how we can utilize the legacy of the airport. We are coming now to the end of, we are almost at the end of the earthworks. So there are a couple of pieces of heavy duty equipment out there which we can use to begin with on the feeder roads, some which are blocked, which we have to try and clear them and to throw some material and to strengthen them and so forth. We can begin to use those to help in the feeder roads. In fact, on Friday, when a number of people probably felt, well, Friday was a peculiar day. It's between, you have all the holidays and then the Saturdays. So you know, anyway, I organized a meeting out at the airport, about 2-hour meeting from 2 o'clock. I had the head of IADC, Dr. Matthias. I had the senior Cuban engineers there, the airport. At Morissette was the Director General of Finance and Planning. At the Chief Engineer, and Minister Francis was there also with me. And without in any way compromising the pace at which we are doing the work at the airport, they have indicated to me that there are 2, 3, maybe 4 pieces, different types of heavy equipment which we can use to help to clear places, and particularly those areas where you have dirt roads now. Remember this, we have about, call it 80 miles of highway. You have about 250 miles of feeder road. A large proportion of those feeder roads are dirt road, and where they were once with some asphalt or cement, areas of them now have become practically dirt. And you have about 400 miles of secondary roads, a lot of them in the villages, so on. So lots of roads in this small country which are motorable. Feeder roads, village secondary roads, we call them village secondary roads, and also the highways. So that's something we have to address early. And both as Prime Minister and with ministerial responsibility for the roads, I want to see us going there. In fact, right as I'm talking to you now, sometimes I'm really sorry for Brent Daly, the chief engineer. The fellow is so overworked. Brent is now meeting 2 persons associated with an application we made for a loan of $30 million US from the OPEC fund, the Kuwaiti fund, and the Saudi fund for feeder roads and secondary roads. And there's some technical things they're working through. Don't know if I'll get any of that money this year. But the point I'm outlining to you, you have to have a framework, you have to have a strategy in which you're moving. That is what we're doing. And so that people can have a sense of hopefulness. There are little places here and there you try and get some pieces. Take, for instance, the piece over Firebun between the Baka Park Hill village and Mongranan. We try and get that done under the BAM, the banana accompanying measures. Little, and you juggle it in this manner, but you have a framework in which you're doing it. The second set of matters which we have to early and to take advantage of the dry season too is this program which we're elaborating on. Well, in continuing the repairs and some rebuilding of houses from the storm damage, but also the program for Lives to Live program. People who have physical disabilities, some mental challenges, they may need a timber, a treated plywood, 1-bedroom self-contained, properly structured. They may need to put on a room, a toilet, for instance. Well, as you know, I will try and do the work as best as I can. In addition to doing it for the country, I have to do it also. I'm a constituency representative. I have a list here, for instance, in my constituency alone, and this is an incomplete list. There's 48 of them here. And I know it's incomplete because there's some old people who have disabilities whom I personally know, not on this list. But several of them need a bathroom and toilet. Some need toilets, some need a house, some need repairs. And it's doable. This person, for instance, all they need is a driveway for a wheelchair. So all of this we will try and provide. And I'm asking everybody to. The ministry is doing work, but the ministry alone, the Ministry of Social Development alone can't do this work. So we have to do it ourselves too and get it done. But this has to be, because we have to try and help these people. We really have to help them. But we have to start and do it early. And I'm sure that the good Lord would bless us in this piece of work to take care of these persons in one way or the other who are disabled. And of course, most of them, this morning, for instance, there's an old friend of mine up in Park Hill. His granddaughter came by. She heard about the program, but his name was not on the list, which had been sent to me and several others. I know him. He's an old friend of mine. He's 70-something years old. Now, in relation to British American insurance, I want to say that I've just before, about 2 weeks before Christmas, and since then last week, 2 weeks before Christmas, I spoke to the finance minister in Trinidad, and last week, Friday, I spoke to Prime Minister Kamala Prasad Bisesa, because she had already indicated since July in a letter to me, which I read out at CARICOM, that the next tranche of $40 million US would be coming. And they're taking some time in getting it to us. So I had to be in communication with them. And I'll be on their case this week again one final matter, an electoral matter, because you know everybody expects an election sometime this year, though I can go up to March the 28th next year. So on December the 4th, I wrote this letter to the Honorable Leader of the Opposition and copied it to the Honorable Attorney General and the Supervisor of Elections. It concerns the voters list. Now everybody knows that the voters list is bloated. It doesn't mean that because the voters list is bloated, the voters list is wrong, or that people who are entitled to vote would not get an opportunity to vote. But where it is bloated is not with dead people named on it, but persons who migrated for in excess of 5 years, and they got an ID card, but after 5 years the name will be taken off, and some are taken off. Who can take them off? The Office of the Supervisor of Elections, but she would have to be satisfied. Either one of her employees, this comes to their attention, or one of the political parties or some member of the public say John Brown has been away, I see his name on the list for over 5 years, he didn't come back. And they check it out and they find that out that that's the case. But it's very difficult because you don't have a connection in terms of an IT system between the Supervisor of Elections office and the immigration. So the Supervisor of Election had submitted some ideas, which you may recall that I raised them in Parliament. Searchlight had written about them. And the Supervisor of Elections has worked with the Honorable Attorney General. And there is a draft amendment in accordance with what the Supervisor of Elections had said and what I reported in Parliament. And this is the letter which I wrote to him on the 4th of December. Dear Anim, fraternal greetings. Enclosed is a draft proposal for the amendment to the Representation of the People Act, Chapter 9 of the Revised Laws of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. You may recall that I raised the issue a few months ago in Parliament, and you appeared receptive in response. The central purpose of the proposed amendment of the Representation of the People Act is to clean up the voters list, which is bulging almost entirely because so many persons on the list have been overseas in excess of 5 years and ought to be removed. The amendment was actually proposed by the Supervisor of Elections. This draft has been approved by her. If you are interested for Parliament to proceed with this matter, I propose the following. 1. The Parliamentary Opposition and your lawyer meet with the Supervisor of Elections and the Honorable Attorney General to discuss the draft with a view to clarifying any relevant issues. 2. The Parliamentary Opposition and the government will then meet with the Supervisor of the Elections and the Attorney General to finalize the draft. And 3. Thereafter, a bill reflecting the agreed draft would be tabled for debate and passage in January 2015. All the best to you and your family. Sincerely yours, Ralph. What I wrote to him, I haven't heard back from him. So I said, since it's a matter of public interest, so it's a month now. So I thought that I should raise it openly to see whether a response would be forthcoming. It would be in the interest of everybody for us to have it cleaned up, because what the supervisor of elections is suggesting is that at a particular date, that because you have a new ID card, if you didn't have an ID card, one of the newer ones issued, say 2004 or early 2005, you had an ID issued earlier, you had been on the list earlier, that we pass a legislative provision that if you being on that list, that in a sense secondary list of that earlier period, not having one of the newer ID cards, that you must then actively come and re-register, because you can't just move your name off the list, so you know. You see the point I'm making? And there's a way in which it can be done, and what the supervisor of elections had suggested is that it seems to be a reasonable suggestion. And as I said, the leader of the opposition, when I had raised it in Parliament, appeared receptive in the brief exchange. So I wrote him. The point is this: persons may be saying, well, why is it that you're head of a political party and you're dealing with this matter in this way? Well, I'm the leader of the House. You have to have a legislation to change it. B, I'm the minister responsible for electoral affairs. The supervisor of election is an independent constitutional authority. I can't give her any directions. And if I'm out of place enough to do that, which I will not do, and I have never done in the 14 years that I've been here with any supervisor of election, they would be at liberty, and they would in fact, because all of them which we have had are persons of integrity, would basically smile at me and said, well, you know, Prime Minister, you can't give me any directions on these matters. And I wouldn't dare to. And I wouldn't do it either. I wouldn't cross the boundaries. I know what are the boundaries. But we have to work it out. It's not that you're not going to have a free and fair election if the list is not cleaned up. Because the reality is this: people who are on the list, who are overseas, very few of them come home in any case to come and vote. But what you would like to have, and as I repeat, once you're on the list, you're under the current law, you can't take it off unless there's evidence, clear evidence provided. The supervisor of election will have to do that. It's a process. But we can go to the Parliament and make an amendment and try to clean it up. That's the only thing which would help. And I know the searchlight again, and I'm sorry that if I mentioned the searchlight twice. I remember there was an excellent editorial in it, where the editor was urging that the Parliament address the question, because she had heard the supervisor of elections speak on the matter. And the supervisor, of course, reported to me. And I told her, she informed me rather than reported to me, and I told her that she must work out the draft with the Honorable Attorney General and her draftspersons. That's what they have done. It isn't Ralph's draft. And that is why I have suggested a process that the parliamentary opposition and their lawyer can meet with the supervisor of elections and the Attorney General, iron out any difficulties, and all of us can meet. And if all of us agree on it, we then find a date. I was hoping we could do it in January, but we may not be able to do it now in January. I hope we can get to it in February early. Because I would like very much to get this out of the way before I speak to the Governor General. Okay. Thank you very much.